I grew up at a large church in Sacramento. It was probably 4,000 or 5,000 people. And I went to high school. They had a private school, and that's where I went to high school. And that's actually when I was in middle school. I met my wife there, and we grew up together. I've known her since I was 12, and told her when we were 13 that we were going to get married. And she was like, "Get away from me, you weirdo." But I went to a great school there, and then all I ever wanted to do from the time that I was 12, I had just an incredible experience with God, and I knew that God had put his finger on my life to spend my life serving him in full-time ministry. And so as I went to high school and I went to Bible college there, and then I went right onto the staff and interned there, and we had a retired pastor that was on the staff. His name was Pastor Vic Trimmer, and he was an incredible man of God. He was probably in his 80s, and he taught at the Bible college, and he was just one of those people that I don't know if you've had this experience, if you've been around church, enough to know what I'm talking about, but he was one of those people that you're like, we all talk about walking with God and knowing God. That guy does it. That guy, he's on a first name basis with God. He was just and so it was really cool. Everybody wanted to be around him, and also he's a little scary. Well, at the church, we had at a church that size, of course, there's a lot of weddings, and sometimes it was just people not even that attended the church, but rent the facility and have their wedding there. And anytime that they didn't request one of the pastors to do their wedding, it was just on a rotation. And so if it fell to you, you got assigned that wedding, and you had to do that wedding. And so Pastor Vic got assigned this wedding, and he was doing this wedding. There was several hundred people there. It was a good sized wedding, and when it was done, he pronounced them husband and wife, and he walked off the stage, and as soon as he got off the stage and they were meeting with the media people to take his mic, he goes, "Well, we'll see how long that one lasts." And his mic was still on, and the whole audience was still there. The parents were, the bride and groom had left, but everybody else was still present. And so everybody was just like, "Oh my God," everybody, clutching their pearls. And I love that story because that's never happened to me. I've had the opportunity to officiate quite a few weddings, and thankfully nothing like that has ever happened. But weddings are always great. Nobody's ever sad at a wedding, or at least they shouldn't be. Nobody's ever mad at a wedding, or at least they shouldn't be. No, weddings are full of love and promise, and it's awesome. And the bride and groom are always so happy, and they're so hopeful, and they're making vows, and they're professing their undying love for each other. But even in the best of circumstances, even when we are most prepared to make that step, to take that step together, we're mostly clueless as to what we just signed up for, especially if it's your first go around, right? You're just mostly have no idea what it is that you just committed your life to, because after your honeymoon, you can't remember when it happened, but life just sort of sets in. And the next thing you know, it's just a regular weekday evening, and you're going around the house at the end of the day, and you're trying to get ready for the next day, and you're noticing all the things that are dirty and all the things that just have to get done, and your husband is upstairs asleep, and you think, "I cannot believe that he's asleep right now." And you think about slapping him while he's asleep and playing it off like he had a bad dream, is that okay? Or maybe just for a second holding the pillow over his head, not enough to do enough damage, but just enough to get out a little bit of because you can't help but feel like, why do I have to do everything around here, right? And it's right about that time that he wakes up, and he's just like, "Hey, if you needed help, why didn't you just ask me?" And your head almost explodes when he says those words, because you're like, "Are you serious? Are you serious? I don't want to have to ask you. Why should I have to ask you? It's our house. You live here. I'm tired of asking." It feels like I'm carrying all of this. Or then there's days where when you come home from work and it was a long day at work, but you're in a pretty good mood and you're ready to relax and have a great night at home. But the moment that you open the door, it's the opposite of relaxing. It's total chaos, because there's a to-do list a mile long, and there's half-opened mail, and there's bills to pay and problems to solve and phone calls that have to be made. And your wife points to your kid's bedroom door and says, "They have been horrible. It's your turn. Oh, and don't don't forget, we've got to be ready for that thing in a half an hour. And you're like, that thing? What thing? I don't want to go to a thing tonight. And she's like, I told you the other day. And you're like, no, you didn't. And yes, I did. And you never listened to me. And you didn't tell me. It was in your imagination, right? And the situation went from 0 to maybe I should have stayed at work in about 30 seconds. And it almost felt like the fight was just sort of waiting for you to walk through the door so it could be had. And you can't help but feel like, could I be any less appreciated in my own home? And honestly, your life is pretty good and your marriage isn't bad. But still, in those crazy, stressful days, it's hard not to feel at some level like, is this it? Is this what I signed up for? This isn't, I don't think this was the plan. I don't think this was the package that I ordered when I stood at the altar. Like, this isn't how I saw it going. This isn't the relationship that I thought I was signing up for. This isn't the life I wanted. Partying and dancing and toasting your never-ending love at your wedding reception seems like a lifetime ago. And now you're just low-key annoyed at them all the time. I mean, you love them, but you hate the way that they chew their gum or brush their teeth or leave their clothes everywhere or load the dishwasher or that they snore or that they sneeze weird, or you hate the way they drive or the way that they make a noise when they drink. Right? Or you just hate sometimes the way that their breathing sounds. You're like, can you breathe quieter, please? Right? And then you come to church and you hear verses that maybe even were in your wedding from 1 Corinthians 13 about love. And they say this, that love is patient and love is kind and it does not envy and it does not boast and it is not proud and it doesn't dishonor others and it's not self-seeking. It's not easily angered and it doesn't keep score. It doesn't keep any record of wrong. And that is so beautiful and so powerful and so inspirational. But if your life has been anything like mine, it also feels so unattainable sometimes. And so you feel bad. Like you read those words and you're like, that's the way love should like behave, but I don't feel that ever, right? So you feel bad and frustrated and sometimes even a little bit stuck. And so last week we kicked off this conversation about relationships. About how we're made for them, but also how they're really, really hard. We talked about how the challenges in our relationships actually often begin with how we handle all the stuff that's outside of our relationships. The way that we handle stress and the weight of life is one of the biggest factors in the health and the happiness and the longevity of our relationships. And so whether you're married or dating, whether you're single or you're just in high school, whether you're divorced or whatever, it doesn't matter. Like all of these ideas and principles apply to us because love doesn't begin with romance, right? We're all in relationships with people that we love and who love us. And this applies to those relationships whether there's romance involved or not. And so last week we ended with these very simple instructions from the New Testament book of Galatians that just simply says, share each other's burdens. But honestly, like if we're just really think about it, if we're just honest with ourselves and one another, like that's really hard because we've got our own burdens. We've got our own stuff to carry. Like life is busy and we're stressed and we're frazzled and we have a million plates that are spinning that we're trying to keep spinning. I've had so many times in my life where I felt like I'm so busy doing all the things that I have to do that I don't have time to do the things that I really want to do, the things that I feel like are a priority to me, the things that I say are important. I mean, you got to grow your business and you got to follow up with clients. And if you use social media at all for your business, like that's a monster that's just always got to be fed. And on top of that, you got a household to run and bills to pay and cars to gas up and wash. And you got asked to coach your kids' basketball team. And you're not even sure you would even be able to make it to their games, much less have time to coach their team. But your kid's begging you, Dad, come on, please, you can do it. And you got dishes and homework and laundry and cooking and cleaning and you're trying to call in that prescription refill or make that dentist appointment, but your phone won't stop dinking and you're just like, for the love. And then you joined a book club or a small group at church to give yourself a little break, but now it's just another thing on your never-ending to-do list. You can't keep up with the reading, and so right before, as it's rolling around, you're searching YouTube for a little synopsis, like what is this book even about? And it's either you do that or you just skip it again. You just don't go. On top of that, you notice the tags on your car are about to expire, and you don't know how that happened. They're supposed to send you a notice. And you just found out that your daughter has this giant school project, and the good news is it's due tomorrow. So yay. And what about romance, right? If you're married, you're in a relationship, it feels like you haven't been on a date or even just connected with your husband or wife or, your significant other in roughly, 3.5 years. And like sex, like when is that supposed to happen? You're just like, how old's our youngest kid? Because that's probably the last time. And the crazy thing about everything I just said, like that barely scratches the surface, right? Because you could probably rattle off 50 other things off the top of your head that are piled up on your life and on your to-do list. You ever feel like life just gets in the way of living? Do you ever feel like life gets in the way of loving? Well, the good news for all of us this morning is that when it comes to the stress in our lives, we're not helpless victims. We all get to choose how we live. All of us. We're not stuck. We can begin to change and make different choices. So the Gottman Institute was founded about 30 years ago, and it's based on the life and work and research of a guy named Dr. John Gottman, who is a psychologist, and he's got like 50 years under his belt of like studying relationships. And so the Institute focuses on helping couples and families have strong, healthy, vibrant, lifelong relationships. Like what makes relationships go? What's the difference maker for people who stay together and have a healthy relationship? And so I was reading a report from them a few weeks ago, and I read something that stuck with me that I haven't been able to stop thinking about ever since I read it. In the report, it said this. It says, based on all our years of research and helping families and marriages, this is what they said, that the number one relational problem for couples is they're doing too much and they refuse to admit it. They're doing too much and they refuse to admit it. They went on to say that the hardest part of helping couples is getting them to see how stressful their lives really are and how that stress is actually impacting them, and that things aren't going to get better until they start doing less and cutting some things out of their life. But they said the problem is that most people just don't want to let go of anything. Isn't that interesting? Even when we're presented with evidence, like decades-long evidence of people who like specialize in this stuff and study this stuff and have spent time with tens or hundreds of thousands of couples, even when we're presented with evidence that the pace and the level that we live at is slowly killing our relationship, we still don't want to let go of anything. See, there's no doubt that life is hard. But the uncomfortable reality is that for most of us, most of what we're carrying, we consented to. We chose it. We're complicit in our own stress levels. Now, of course, there are exceptions, right? There's the big stuff that's out of our control. Somebody crashes into your car, a loved one dies, a natural disaster hits, right? You have a sick kid, whatever, chronic thing, whatever. Like there's stuff that's out of our control. But so much of what we're carrying, like we actually chose, we consented to it. It wasn't done to us. We're like, yeah, I feel like I need to do this. We need to go this direction. This is what we want. We're complicit in our own stress. And the funny thing is just like the people that the Gottman Institute was talking about. I think so many of us hear all of this stuff and we're like the people in the study, right? We don't want to let go of anything because we're like, what am I supposed to let go of? And so you're just like, I don't know, man. Like, I mean, sure, we're busy, but we like being active. We love having stuff to do. Plus, you got to support your kids and you got to give them all the opportunities that you didn't have. And we got lots of goals that we're really chasing after. And so, yeah, we're grinding right now, and she's got a side thing, and I got a side hustle. But we definitely make sure that we have plenty of time to do the things that we enjoy doing, to try to relax and have fun. We think we're the exception. It's everybody else that's too busy. It's everybody else whose stress is killing their relationship. We got it under control. So there are some really challenging words in Proverbs chapter 14, just in verse 8. It says this. It says, the wisdom of the prudent is to give thought to their ways, but the folly of fools is deception. The wisdom of the prudent is to give thought to their ways, but the folly of fools is deception. And so God's going, look, wisdom is being willing to take time to actually think about your life, to think about the way that you're living, about the choices that you make. And he actually uses the word prudent. And the Hebrew word that gets translated into English as prudent, there's this sense when you read that word and the definition that it's the idea of like, it's people who understand that all of life is connected. See, we tend to view our lives as separate chunks where we got work and we got home and I'm a dad and I'm doing this and I got this. We view all these chunks separately, but God's going, no, it's all you. It's all your life. It's all connected. And whatever you do over here, it doesn't just affect what happens over here. It affects what happens over there. And not only does it affect what happens over there, but what you do over there, there's a compounding effect when you start to stack those things on top of one another. See, there's only so much that you can pour into a cup before it spills all over the place, right? And there's only so much that you can cram into your life before it starts to spill out all over the place. And so you know what we do when we're overwhelmed, when we realize like, oh my gosh, life is too much for us? You know what we do? We go, you know what would fix this? We need to add something else. The problem is we're missing something. You know what we should do or try or buy? Something new. And when we do that just for a brief moment, we get a little bit of a reprieve because we're distracted by that shiny new little thing in our life. But look, like if a cup is full, it doesn't matter what you pour into it. It's going to make a mess. It doesn't matter if that thing is fun. It doesn't matter if it's good. It doesn't matter if it's the most expensive wine on planet Earth. It doesn't matter if it's a perfectly brewed cup of coffee. If the cup is full, it's just going to spill everywhere and make a mess. And so that's what we do in our lives, and then we're confused when it just doesn't work. Like, how did this happen? Why do we do that? Well, Proverbs would say because we haven't connected the dots. We think we're the exception. Because we grow up being bombarded with the message that we can be and have and do it all. And we think if we could just make a little bit more money over here, or we could be a little bit more productive and efficient over there, that we could plan and organize and maximize our time and our money into having and experiencing everything. And we know it can be done because there's people on the internet that told us that they did it. And everything on the internet's true. But God says that the wise, they actually give thought to their ways, meaning their patterns, their habits, their schedules, their behaviors, their priorities, their ways. And they recognize that they're not just making choices, but those choices are leading, that they're leading them somewhere, that they're on a path. See, your life has your relationship on a path. Do you know where that path is leading you? Everything you're doing, everything you're carrying, everything you're chasing, everything you're sacrificing, it's a path and it's leading somewhere. Are you sure it's leading your life? Are you sure it's leading your relationships where you want them to go? Because the prudent give thought to their ways. I've had so many conversations with couples in the last 20 years as a pastor, as a lead pastor, who overpack and then overflow their life and their schedules, and then they just can't understand why they just don't ever connect like they used to. They can't understand why they grew apart. And here's the thing, and you maybe even have experienced this. We can't survive without connection. And so if we can't get it from each other, we'll just get it somewhere else. And I'm not even talking about having an affair. I just mean like we will find all kinds of ways to feel seen and known and connected, even if it's shallow, even if it's fleeting. And so we are more and more and more and more connected to a device, and we're scrolling and then doom scrolling, and we're texting and we're emailing, and we're sitting right next to people that we're not connected to, talking to people we've never met. Or we double down at work, or we live vicariously through our kids, or we spend extra time at the gym because there's a couple of people that we've actually got to know a little bit. We spend hours on end gaming with people we've never actually met, or a million other things. And somewhere along the way, we lose each other. But the wisdom of the prudent gives thought to their ways. The last part of Proverbs 14, verse 8, he says, the folly of fools is deception. That word folly just means ignorance. It's naivete. It's a profound lack of insight. And what he's saying is like, it's possible for you to deceive yourself into thinking that you won't end up exactly where you were headed all along. And then you'll be totally surprised when you get there. You were on the path that was leading you over there. And then you got there and you're like, how did this happen? How did we get here? How foolish is that? Have you ever watched that unfold in someone else's life? Like they're going that way, but they keep insisting they're not going that way. And then even if they do admit that they're going that way, they know what they're doing going that way. They know how to go that way but end up over there. They know how to go that way and not end up that way. They know that they can take the 84 West and then they're surprised when they end up in Portland and not Salt Lake City. And that's what got me about the Gottman Institute report, because that's essentially what they're saying about so many of us when it comes to the pace and the way that we live. The stress that it's causing us, and we're ignorant and we're naive because we just get used to it and it feels normal, and we're blinded to the toll that it's taking on us, and we're very, very much blinded to the toll that it's taking on our relationships. But the prudent give thought to their ways, and the folly of fools is deception. In Proverbs 24, verses 3 and 4, it says, by wisdom a house is built, and through understanding it's established. Through knowledge its rooms are filled with rare and beautiful treasures. Now, in case you're wondering, this is not an observation about construction. It's an observation about life, about your home, about the life that you're building, about your relationships. And so he's like, the kind of relationships, the kind of households, the kind of families that we all want, that we all thought we were going to get when we stood at the altar and we looked them in the eye and we said, I do. The kind of relationships and families and households that God intended. He's like, they're not built just by intention. They're not just built even by commitment. They're built by wisdom. They're made strong, and he uses the word established. They're not easily destroyed. How? By understanding. See, love is why you build a life with somebody, but wisdom is how you build that life. Let me give you an example. I could decide today that I really, really do want to actually build a house myself with my hands. I want to buy the materials. I'm going to build a house. I've never built a dog house. I've never built anything in my life. But I could decide I'm going to build a house, and I mean it. I'm committed to build. I'm as committed to building this house as I can be. And I put all of my effort into that building. But guess what? When I'm done, if there is a house, definitely nobody should live in it. Because it doesn't matter how committed I was. It doesn't matter how hard I worked. It doesn't matter how much love I put into the process. It's just only a matter of time before it collapses and kills the people inside. Because it takes wisdom and understanding to build it. And he's not talking about houses. And he says, through knowledge, a house is filled with rare and beautiful treasures. See, our houses are actual physical homes. Our lives fill up with the things that we value. Have you ever known somebody who was like obsessed with something, or they're really into something, or they started collecting certain things and it just filled up their space, just filled up their house? So my wife has a cousin named Gretchen, and she's a little older than her. And Gretchen, for most of her life, was obsessed, like including into her adult life, obsessed with Barbie dolls. And so she had thousands upon thousands of Barbie dolls in their boxes, unopened. She had multiple rooms where they were just hot glued in rows on all the walls and shelves and into the closet. And they were everywhere, displayed everywhere. She was on the news multiple times, so people go, look at that crazy lady. It was wild. But that's, maybe to a lesser degree, right? But that's what we do, right? Whether it's books or it's hunting trophies or it's Disney stuff or it's sports memorabilia or whatever. We just fill up our lives with things that we value, that we think are important. And let me tell you the obvious thing that you already know. This isn't just true of our actual physical space that we live in, our actual house. It's true of our lives as well. See, often our highest value is just more when it comes to our life. More stuff, more activity, more going, more doing, more achievement, more money, just newer, bigger, better, more. And so we fill up all the space in our lives. We fill up all the space in our calendars, in our schedules. We have no margin, no breathing room. We live at or beyond our limits when it comes to, time and energy and emotional energy and money. And then we wonder, why am I so stressed out? So every relationship has thirds. In any relationship or friendship, obviously there's the two of you, the two people in the relationship, and everything outside of your relationship is a third. And so we all have them, and they're not all bad. In fact, in most situations, especially if you're in a family situation, right, some of those thirds are good. They're necessary. It's part of life. But all the thirds in your life have to be managed because they have the ability, every third, even the good ones, even the necessary ones, have the ability to undermine your connection by just slowly, drip by drip, draining the energy and the resources and the time and the trust from your relationship. How do you manage your thirds? How are you doing with the thirds in your life? Everything that's outside of, if you're in a relationship with somebody, everything that's outside of the two of you, how are you managing that? A lot of it's got to get done. A lot of it is necessary. Some of it's really good, but how are you managing it? How are you making sure that it's not draining your connection with the other person? In Ephesians chapter 5, beginning with verse 17, the Apostle Paul wrote this in a letter to some Christians that were in a church in a city called Ephesus. He says, "Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is." Now, notice the descriptions are not like of the lives that we live or that he's talking about in this. They're not lives of good and evil, but of wise and unwise. Maybe you're sensing a theme here today because a lot of the verses that we've talked about are talking about wisdom. See, one of the primary lenses that God wants to give us for evaluating our lives and our relationships is learning to separate what is wise from what is unwise. We sometimes struggle separating what's good from not good, but most of the time we get our arms around that. But just because something's good doesn't mean it's wise. And so God is wanting to give us this lens where we begin to evaluate our life and our pattern and the path we're on and how we're relating to one another and how we're managing the stuff that's outside of our relationship. And the lens he's going is like, is this wise or unwise? So that we can, for us to be able to discern not just right from wrong, not just sin from unsin, but healthy from unhealthy. See, it's possible for you to be a Christian, for you to be forgiven, for you to be a Jesus follower, for you to be a good person, and still have families and relationships that are a hot mess because you're unwise. You might even know people like that. Like they've known Jesus for a long time, but their relationships are a disaster because they haven't learned how to separate what's wise from unwise, what's good and healthy from what's unhealthy. And so he's going, be very careful how you live because you don't want to get to the end of your life and look back on the way that you lived. You don't want to get to the end of your life and look back on what you built. You don't want to get to the end of your life and look back on your family and on your relationships and realize that you missed it, that you were unwise. And so he says, be very careful how you're living. It's a serious warning. Why? Because God will be mad at you? No, that's not what he says. Because you get one life. And the overwhelming magnetic pull will be towards what's unhealthy and unwise. The overwhelming magnetic force that will pull you towards more and more and more, to consent to more, to add more, and good stuff after good stuff after good stuff, until it's so heavy you can't carry it. In both your relationship with God and in your relationships with people. Because you can't have and be and do it all. You can do anything, but you can't do everything. You got to make some choices. Everything's a trade-off. It might not be wrong or destructive, but is it wise? And then he uses the phrase, he says, because the days are evil. And certainly that word evil that he uses there certainly can mean wicked or evil. But here, like, it gets translated, what he's getting at is like, life is hard. It's full of hardships and annoyances, and it's mostly like a lot of work and labor and pain. Aren't you glad that God acknowledges that life is hard? That life is annoying sometimes? I know I am. But if we were to apply these words to our relationships, he's going, life is hard, and if you're not careful, your time and your life and your relationships will be stolen from you because you will continue to choose what is unwise. And so you'll fill your life up and you'll fill your relationships up, and they'll get crowded out with lesser things. And he's going, don't do that. Be very careful. Make the most of your opportunities. Make the most of your relationships. Make the greatest investments of your time and your energy and your treasure of who you are into those that you love. Don't give them the leftovers. I wonder what it would look like, what the conversation would be like for you if you sat down and began to take an inventory of all your thirds. Everything, and you can, if you're not in a relationship right now, romantic relationship, or you're not married, you're not a couple, just do that like with a close friend. Just think through that relationship. Think about all the stuff that's on the outside of that friendship. And look at all those things and how you're managing them. All the stuff that's outside of that, all that stuff that takes energy and resources and time and trust away from that relationship. And it could be home stuff, and it could be work stuff, and it could be kid stuff, and it might be hard stuff like the curveballs that life throws at you, and it might even be good stuff like vacations and hobbies and holidays with family. But here's the thing. You can't fix an overcrowded, overflowing life with just trying to get better, just trying to make a few tweaks, with just optimistic thinking. You can't cross your fingers and hope you make it through, because love always, 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 always sets limits. And so that means that you're going to have to make some choices. It means you're going to have to let go of some things. You're going to have to say no to some things. So we've talked about wisdom a lot today. The question is, how do you live like those who are wise? So I want to give you like a simple place to start. I want to give you a question that's a simple place to start. And this question has been a primary filter in our home, in our family, really the last 15 years or so. And here it is. It's so basic, I'm embarrassed, but I think it's going to be helpful to you. It's this question right here. In light of blank, is this wise? Is it wise? In light of blank, is it wise? And you get to fill in the blank. See, if you or your family get invited to go do something this next week, after you've decided whether or not it's something you want to do and whether or not you want to go, because that's the first filter, right? It's like, I don't really want to go, so I'm going to tell you no. Right? But if you decide like, yeah, I want to do that, that's like the decision-making process is pretty simple from that standpoint. We have two primary questions. Are we available? Can we make it work? Do we have the time to make it work? And can we afford it? That's the filter we have, right? And honestly, those aren't bad questions. Those are good questions. But there is a better question. The better question is it wise? And so you fill in the blank with the important stuff of your life, right? In light of our current family situation, is it wise for us to do that? Is it wise for us to go there on that day? In light of the fact that our marriage isn't where it needs to be, is this wise? In light of the fact that we have 2 kids in diapers right now, is it wise for us to take this on? In light of the fact that we have a 17-year-old who only has 1 year left at home, is it wise for us to do this? Given our past experiences and our present realities and our future hopes and plans, is it wise for us to do this? Not is it wrong, not is it fun, Not do I like it, not will it benefit me, not is it what my family did when we were growing up. Is it wise? Is it going to benefit our relationship? Is it going to make us stronger? Is it going to bond us together? Is it going to increase or decrease the magic between us? Does it keep us on the path that we want to be on? Is it building our relationship and our family the way we want it to be built? If not, and it might be time for you just to say no to that thing, or at least table it for a little while. Because saying yes to the very best things will always require that you say no to a lot of really good things. And how do you decide what to say no to? Is it wise? In light of this, is it wise? And so my question for you today, what is it that you're carrying? What is it that you complain about when it comes to your load and your stress? But you consented to it. You chose it. What stress in your life are you complicit in? Because you've convinced yourself that this is just the way it is, or this is just the way it has to be, or it's just going to be this for 6 months, and now it's 6 years later. What have you decided? It's okay because it's not affecting me. And even if it's true, it's not affecting you. It's affecting the people you love. It's affecting the relationship. Is it wise? Because love is why you build. Nobody's questioning whether or not there's love in that relationship for you. Love is why you build, but wisdom is how you go about it. So that section of verses we read in Ephesians 5, it ends this way in verse 17. We read it together. It says, therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. The one translation says, don't be foolish, but understand what God wants you to do. Don't be foolish. Don't be short-sighted. Don't fail to connect the dots here, but understand what God wants you to do. And how do you know what God wants you to do? Well, this is a perfect place for us to start, because whatever else it entails, I can tell you that it starts with relationships. It starts with how you're connected to God, and it starts with how you're connected to the people around you. That's why we're having this conversation in church, because this is the perfect place. This is the best place for us to have this conversation, because it's the way that God designed us for relationships with each other and for relationship with Him. That's why Jesus stepped into human history. That's why He came and made the most of His opportunity to rescue humanity, to prioritize love and sacrifice for us. What is it that you're carrying? What is it that you need to offload? What path are you on? Is it wise? Let's pray.
South Hills Church, I just want to take a moment and say thank you for watching our service online. Whether you're watching it for the first time or you're watching it again because you enjoyed the service so much from the weekend, I'd like to take a moment and dive into our giving. Every week we give people the opportunity to give back and give to the local church so that God can continue to bless your lives and bless your finances. Here at South Hills, we believe that everything comes from God. We believe that He's the one that chose us and brought us into this world, gave us our gifts and talents and abilities. And I just want you to know that when we give, we are giving back what God has already given to us. If you've ever seen any of our envelopes at a South Hills campus, you'll see on there that it says, every week at South Hills, your generosity is giving people the opportunity to live a better story. And there's a scripture on there in Matthew chapter 6, verse 21 that says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So I want to encourage you today to click down below and set up your giving, whether it's for the first time or whether you're doing reoccurring giving. We have 4 ways to give here at South Hills. 1, you can do it in person at any of our campuses through an envelope. Or 2, you can actually text any amount that you would like to 84321. And the 3rd way is to download our Church Center app. I encourage you to do this one because the Church Center app gives you opportunity to stay connected with our church and your campuses. It's a great tool and resource for you to know what's going on. And the 4th way to give is to give online. You can go to southhills.org/give and you can set up your giving there. Whether you're a guest of our church or whether you are a member of our church, or whether you simply just like to watch our services, I encourage you you to trust God with your finances so that He can bless and anoint your finances, and you can be trusting God in this journey of living life to the fullest. I love you, and thank you for watching our online service today.